Shalom everyone, my name is Godwill Yitzhak Sirengwani from Beit, Shuvu Africa, and I'm so excited because we are in a time of Hanukkah. In fact, I'm here to say a bit about this week's Parashat Miketz. Miketz means at the end. Parashat Miketz is found in Genesis 41 verse 1 up to 44 verse 17. So as I was saying, this Shabbat is a whole combination of different appointments of God, because it's going to be Shabbat Miketz, it's also going to be Shabbat Rosh Chodesh for the new month of Teves, and it's also going to be Shabbat Hanukkah. So please do remember to do the Hanukkah, to observe the Hanukkah festival in your houses, to lihadlik ner Hanukkah, to light the lights of Hanukkah in your homes. Chag Hanukkah Sameach. Today, our Parashat Miketz gives us a lesson on humility and also on acknowledging God in everything that we do. First, I will read from Genesis chapter 41, verse 1, and that is the very first verse of this parasha. And before I read, let us bless the reading of the Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us in his commandments and commanded us to be engrossed in the business of the Torah. Amen. So I'm going to read from Parashat chapter 41 verse 1, or Genesis chapter 41 verse 1. It says in the Hebrew, Vayhi Miketz Shenatayim Yamim Ufar'o Cholem Vehine Omed Al Hayor. In English it says, it happened at the end of 2 years to the day Pharaoh was dreaming that behold, he was standing over the river. One of our sages, Rashi, according to Rashi, Rashi is one of the Torah sages. He says that that word Yeor, right at the end of verse 1, actually means canal, although it is mostly interpreted as river. It actually means canal, and the Nile will be referred to as such. Why? Because the Egyptian farmers, they used to create a network of canals that would help them to irrigate in as much farmland as possible in the land of Egypt. So, in the Jewish timeline, this dream that Pharaoh has, where we are told that Pharaoh was dreaming and he was standing over the canal. This dream that Pharaoh dreamt, it actually was an indicator that it was now time to free Joseph. The time to free Joseph had come. And after the freeing of Joseph, the next thing that would begin would be the chain of events that would bring Jacob, Israel, and his family over to Egypt and fulfill the last part of God's prophecy that he said to Abraham, that his offspring would become strangers or foreigners in a land not their own, and that they would be enslaved, and that they would be oppressed 400 years, and eventually they will be delivered. This prophecy was given in Genesis chapter 15 from verse 13 onwards. In terms of the events, here we are. We have Pharaoh, he has a dream. And here we are. We have Joseph, he is in prison. We also have another character to this, who is the chief of the cupbearers, who actually forgot Joseph because Joseph had made a request to him that when you have been freed, may you please tell Pharaoh about me, that I can interpret dreams, and that there's nothing that I have done wrong and I've been imprisoned for no reason. But he had forgotten about this. So we have got these three people in this juncture. Now, in terms of Pharaoh, he had a dream. It was a double dream. It was one dream because in the Torah it says, behold, it was a dream. So he had a double dream, but no one could interpret his double dream, albeit of the fact that it was such an important double dream, because it was going now to set off all those things that were about to happen to the nation of Israel. So, while we say no one could interpret the dream, this was until the chief of the cupbearer spoke to Pharaoh, and he told him that there was something that he had done which was really wrong. He had sinned, and he had forgotten, or he had neglected to tell him about the youth, the Hebrew youth who was a slave that was in prison, and who had interpreted the dream that freed him and his colleague, even though his colleague was then put to death. So let us read what then ensues from Genesis chapter 41, verse 15 to 16. So it says, then Pharaoh, after Pharaoh had been told about this Hebrew boy, then he called that he comes out and that he sees him. Then the Torah says, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I dreamed a dream and there's no one to interpret it. I heard about you. It is said that you can listen to a dream and interpret it. Verse 16. Then Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it's not within me. God will answer with shalom for Pharaoh. Wow, can you hear that? There is a man who has just been, as far as he knew, temporarily released from prison. And he's standing before the most powerful man in Egypt. And here, he has got an ability, which if Pharaoh would know that there's something special about him, Pharaoh might decide that he won't go back to jail. But here we have Joseph. He's humbling himself. And he is saying to Pharaoh, it's not within me. In other words, it's not within me to interpret your dream, but God will answer with shalom for Pharaoh. When we stand on the shoulders of our sages and we read from the writings of Mizrahi, actually the way he comments about this, he says Joseph gave credit to the one whom credit was due, refusing to accept the imputation that he had any special spiritual powers. And our Torah scholars also note that Joseph's integrity would not permit him to accept credit for himself, despite the reality of the danger that Pharaoh might send him back into prison or into jail if there was nothing outstanding about him. So we can say, in other words, that Joseph actually took a risk. He took a risk of going back to jail, because he said, no matter what, I know that God has given me this ability, but I'm not going to act as if I'm the one who has got the ability. That takes humility. And that is the lesson that we learn from this week's Torah. We need to humble ourselves before God. Elsewhere it has been written that in Him, in God, we live, we move, and we have our being. So we must realize that the whole entirety of our being, we must realize that all these good things that we are able to do, even deep within our hearts, we need to know within our hearts that God is the one that gives us enablement. Even when you look at Daniel, in Daniel chapter 2, when Daniel was interpreting the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar the king, Daniel also made the same confession before the mighty men of the land, before the king. He says, it is not me, but he acknowledged God. And the thing is, these two great men were humble before God, and they realized that God is the one who enables them. And there's something very special that God says in the book of 1 Samuel chapter 2, the second part of verse 30. God himself speaks something concerning people who do this. He says, "For I will honor those who honor me, but those who despise me will be disdained." Haverim, today, let us make up our minds, let us make up our hearts, let us set it within ourselves that in every good thing that we are able to do, in all those special abilities that we do, let us honor God. Let us remember that He is the one that enables us. Remember Yeshua, the Son of God himself, but he was humble enough to ride on a donkey. But not only was Yeshua humble enough to ride on a donkey, but he was humble enough to lay his life on the stake for the sake of you and me, that today we may be atoned, may be restored back into the kingdom of our eternal Father. So let us humble ourselves, let us know, and let us recognize what God does through us. Chag Chanukah Sameach. Amen.